Oh, Mikey, you're so fine, you blow my mind. Hey, Mikey. And hey, Internet. On here once again, continuing the coin-op kick I've been on lately with the beloved arcade game of my childhood, Konami's Mikey. Released in 1984, Mikey is the tale of an American high school student and his mission to ditch class and hook up with his girlfriend Mandy, equipped with only his skull and mighty butt cheeks. Bear with me, it'll all make sense soon enough. Anyway, my very limited and informal research indicates that the most common and well-known version of this game is a revision titled Mikey High School Graffiti. This, however, is not the Mikey of my youth, and though it has some fine qualities, I regard it as somewhat watered down. We'll look at High School Graffiti and a third variant later, but let's begin at the beginning, with my personal favorite, Mikey Original Recipe. As is our usual wont, we'll take a quick spin through the attract mode and see that Mikey's mighty butt cheeks can knock his classmates out of their seats. As for his skull, it can be used to smash open glass jars. Valuable survival techniques for any American teenager. And here we have a preview of the first stage, which takes place in Mikey's home room, and just like every stage, the objective here is to collect all the hearts, which Mikey's classmates are sitting on, hence the need for the butt cheeks technique. And our main danger here comes in the form of Mikey's homeroom teacher. Well, I think that's a reasonable breakdown of the basics. Let's go ahead and drop in our virtual quarter and get this show on the road. We begin in our seat, and as long as we are seated, the teacher is not interested in us and will be content to scribble away at the blackboard, repeatedly writing the theory of relativity for whatever reason. However, if we stand up, he'll immediately come after us. We can get a reprieve by sitting back down in any available seat, though, and he'll go right back up to the blackboard. That won't get us the hearts we need to move on to the next part of the level, though, so we're gonna have to attack our classmates with our mighty butt cheeks. Now, if the teacher's bearing down on us and we don't have time to take a seat, we can headbutt him right in the fucking face and drop him like a sack of potatoes. And as you can see, if you sit down after that, he will once again go right back up to the blackboard as if it never happened, because high school teachers have the memory of goldfish. And as you can see at the top of the screen, by picking up hearts we are gradually spelling the word open, and once we get the exclamation point, we're free to move along to Hallway 1, where we encounter our next enemy, the janitor, and can pick up American flag lunchboxes for bonus points. The teacher will give chase, so we'll want to move along quickly to the next area, which is the locker room. The locker room contains 3 bins of 3 basketballs each, and basketball is among the most irresistible forces in the world of Mikey, so you can throw a basketball to the teacher, the janitor, or the chef who's here for some reason, and they will be compelled to dribble until they've gotten it out of their system. So that's just one other thing that you can do to get them off your tail. Now the hearts here are contained in glass jars, which take 3 headbutts each to crack open. Don't try this at home. That can slow you down quite a bit, making the basketball distractions all the more valuable. Eventually, however, you'll be able to spell out the words "get on" and move on to hallway number 2, where we have the usual bonus lunchboxes, the usual threats of the teacher and janitor, and down here to the right we have a metal shutter that I can open up for a little bonus. However, if you hang around on any floor of the hallway for too long, you run the risk of someone from off-screen throwing a fire bucket at you, and that has given us our first death. Let's try that again. The bonus is just a one-time thing, so we will dodge the fire bucket this time, deal out a few well-placed headbutts, and move on to the restaurant, which seems to me like a strange choice of term. In a high school, I would think cafeteria would be a little more apropos. Anyway, the chefs here at least actually make sense, and in the top middle we have one who will throw meat at us. However, from these bowls on the tables here, we can also throw meat ourselves, 3 servings each, and just like basketballs, our pursuers will be compelled to chow down for a while. However, if we get beamed with a slab of meat ourselves, we will not be compelled to chow down, we'll just die. Mikey is a very, very strict vegan, I suppose. Anyway, the hearts here are mostly just scattered around the floor, which makes them fairly easy to pick up, but there is one in the central table that has a glass jar around it, and we'll break that with the usual 3 headbutts, which in this case is a little easier to do from the side. That'll spell out "hold on," and we will move along to hallway 1 again, this time the lower half. By the way, in the hallways the janitor just moves in a set pattern and doesn't actually pursue you, so not a big threat if you're careful. And there's our bonus hamburger behind the shutter. And moving along, we come to the dance studio, where there is a teacher up front who really strokes out if you headbutt her. And as usual, our homeroom teacher will also pursue us. We have dancers moving around the studio who will stun us if we get too close. They cannot be headbutted or impeded in any way, so you just have to stay clear of them as much as possible. The dance teacher will not threaten you unless you move up to the front of the room, at which time she will come after you. Anyway, nothing too complicated there. We're on to hallway 2 again, second half. And we move along to the garden, which will be the final stage of step 1. Here we see that Mikey has somehow gotten the football team pissed off at him, and headbutting someone wearing a football helmet and full face mask seems like a bad idea, but it does work. However, they do recover almost instantly, so something to be careful of. With all the hearts, we can finally meet with Mandy as our car drives up with no one in it. That's weird. We give her a little love note, get a kiss on the cheek, and wait a minute! Computer enhance. Now, I'm sure the intended meaning here is that Mikey is gasping and sweating with relief, or shouting in elation, or something of that general nature, but that is an O-face if ever I've seen one. Oh, poor Mikey. You take pains to project the perfect image of rebellious teen sang-froid, but one chaste smooch from your sweetheart and you unload both barrels straight into your boxers. Also, he appears to be bleeding from the nose, so there's that too. Well, that bit of embarrassment aside, we're free to drive off in our autopilot-enabled car, and then it's on to a new day in Step 2. This time we'll be starting off in the locker room. Enemies do get a little faster from step to step, but the hazards are by and large the same. You don't really have to learn anything new in most cases. However, there is one room in particular that has a new hazard, and we'll be seeing that soon. Now, something I haven't previously mentioned is that there's a heart border moving around between the hearts we have to collect, regularly cycling through them, and if we pick up a heart when the border is over it, we get bonus points and the letter appears in red at the top of the screen. This time we're spelling out, I dig you. Oh, that's sweet. It's good to see that Mikey and Mandy are still into each other even after the pants incident. Moving on, we return to hallway 1. Oh, badly timed headbutt there, and even though the hallway janitor does not actively pursue you, unintended contact will still kill you just as dead. Back to the classroom, and oh, there it is, the look of hate. From step 2 onward, anytime you're up in front of the classroom, Mikey's classmates will direct the look of hate at him, and that will kill you as sure as any contact with faculty or staff. Also, I couldn't swear to it, but it seems that in step 2 onward, Mikey's classmates will resist the butt thrusts a little more readily and push back against you, so it may take a few more hits. By the way, in case you hadn't already recognized it, what we've got here is a lovely chiptune rendition of A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles. Also, according to the arcade flyer for Mikey, the butt thrust is officially called the hip zap. The more you know. Anyway, one more football player down, and we can make a run for the door and try to get out before the look of hate brings us down. For in the Mikey universe, basketballs are irresistible, and looks can literally kill. As can janitors. Gotta be a little more careful about that. Something I neglected to capture in my main recording is that opening most of the unmarked hallway doors will get you smacked by a giant boxing glove. However, sometimes a door will show you a girl wearing a towel and give you a nice 5,000 point bonus. Ooh la la. Back in Playthrough Prime, at this point we've seen just about all there is to see from Mikey Classic. The enemies continue to get a little more hitch in their giddy-up, and every now and then you'll have to pick up an extra heart or two in order to finish a stage. For example, here in Step 2's restaurant, we have not one heart in a jar at the central table, but 2. But really, that's just gonna be the way things are for the remainder of the game. Minor variations on previously seen stages ad infinitum. Yes, like many arcade games of the time, Mikey has no ending. It'll just continue to cycle through the same schoolrooms over and over again until you finally run out of lives or just get tired of playing. But that's okay. This game, I think, has that good digital crack quality. At least for me, it's a game I can always pick back up and play as long as I can stand it. And it's a tough game, but not unfairly so. You may have noticed that's a bit of a theme for me. I like difficult games, but games in which the difficulty comes at you honestly. God Hand, the Soul series, Darkest Dungeon. I did finally finish Darkest Dungeon, by the way, and I finished it in a way that I'm really kind of proud of. The theme of Darkest Dungeon is basically Lovecraft goes low fantasy, so it's not any major spoiler if I say that the end boss is your standard Eldritch Abomination, Progenitor Elder God type. And there's a character class, the Bounty Hunter, that has a low damage punch attack. Doesn't hit very hard, but is useful for inflicting stun and knockback. Anyway, I had the last boss down to its final few hit points, and my Bounty Hunter's turn came up, and, well, it was just too perfect. I had to. So yes, I brought Darkest Dungeon to an end by almost literally punching out Cthulhu. Very satisfying, I have to say. But back on the topic of the game we're actually looking at right now, if the music for the dance studio stage struck you as familiar, there's a good reason for that. Much as the classroom had a hard day's night, here in the dance studio we're treated to a chiptune rendition of Twist and Shout, which, given the truly alarming seizure that the gym teacher goes through anytime she takes a headbutt, well, it seems fairly appropriate. By the way, those two songs were officially licensed for the Japanese release, and proper credit was given in the game's documentation, but I don't know if that was the case outside of Japan. Certainly I don't remember seeing any music credits on the cabinet, but then again, I wasn't exactly looking for them at the time. Whatever the case, I don't think any legal action was ever brought over it if they weren't officially licensed for the States. People probably weren't exactly keeping an eye for intellectual property violations in arcade games way back in the mid-'80s. There were a few high-profile cases, like one involving Donkey Kong and King Kong, but not too many. And I think it's safe to say that Mikey was never quite the phenomenon that Donkey Kong was. In fact, I'm pretty sure Mikey was never really any kind of phenomenon at all. In all of my wanderings, I've only ever actually seen one Mikey cabinet. And that's really kind of a shame, because again, I do consider this quite a good game. It's got a good challenge curve, and it's got some nice variation in it. I mean, the basic mechanics always stay the same, but as you move from room to room, you have to deal with things like breaking open jars, dodging flying meat, knocking classmates over with your ass. Keeps things interesting, and surreal. And I appear to be down to my last life, so Step 3 looks to be about as far as we go today. But that's alright, we've seen everything we came to see. On that note, I should mention that you don't normally start with as many lives as I did. I believe the default setting is 3 lives, but on a bad day in Mikey, you can blow through 3 lives in no time flat, so just to make sure I could show you everything I needed to show you, I gave myself the largest possible number. My memory on such things is not completely reliable, but I want to say the farthest I've ever gotten on a standard 3-life game was Step 4, which is not too bad, I think. Certainly a lot better than I'm doing this time. But hey, I've had worse games too. Now the question only remains, will I be able to at least get out of the classroom before we finally end our trip through Classic Mikey? Oh, and we've got another life. That's another thing that can help you keep this game a-rolling. It's not too stingy about awarding extra lives at certain score milestones. Not gonna waste any time with the lunchboxes and whatnot. I have to admit, when I play this, I tend to play for distance rather than score. I don't think that's really what was intended, but I just like seeing how far I can go. And fiddling around with the lunchboxes or trying to get the girl in the towel, that can get you killed, especially because of the fire bucket. Ah! Come on, we gotta finish up the locker room. I want to spell I dig you one more time. Oh, but sadly it is not to be. And thus our journey through Classic Mikey comes to an end. Not too great for a 7-life game, but it got the job done. I actually really like that high score entry music. Probably my favorite track in the game. Anyway, though, that's about enough for Classic. Now, let's take a look at an alternate version of the game, Mikey High School Graffiti. It might have crossed your mind that certain behaviors depicted in Mikey Classic, such as physically assaulting school teachers and breaking glassware with one's head, might be considered dangerous and/or downright antisocial. High School Graffiti aims to address these concerns. As I mentioned in the intro, this seems to be the best-known version of the game, though I base that on entirely unscientific internet digging, anecdotal recollections, and on it being the basis for the C64 and various other home computer ports by Imagine Software. I don't totally hate this revision or anything. At its core, it's still Mikey, still a good game, and a few of the changes are quite clever. That said, I can't help but feel that in transition to a kinder, gentler Mikey, High School Graffiti loses a certain something. Well, let's give it a look, and you can decide for yourself. Okay, title screen has High School Graffiti across the top, but otherwise about the same. The hip zap is intact, that's good to see. But instead of the jars, we have little piles of 3 hearts, and what's he doing to them? And here in the preview of the classroom, there's already something very different. Can you spot the difference, class? That didn't last long, and that's definitely not the death animation we've grown accustomed to. Well, we'll address all that in a little more detail shortly. Let's get started. So the first big difference that I alluded to a moment ago, you've probably noticed quite easily, is that the blackboard now says failure teaches success instead of E equals MC squared. A nice bit of doublethink that seems quite appropriate for a game released in 1984. And what's this? Our headbutt is gone! Yes, Mikey's headbutt has been completely removed and now he can only yell. And as you just witnessed from my untimely demise there, the yell has absolutely no effect on Mikey's homeroom teacher. You might be noticing that the teacher moves a little more slowly compared to his more energetic jog from Mikey Classic. That, I'm guessing, is a bit of rebalancing done to make up for the fact that you can no longer stun him more or less at will, provided of course you have the right spacing and timing. Also, as we briefly touched on during the attract mode, the death animation for Mikey is quite a bit different. Time was, he would fall to the floor and writhe in agony, which I suppose could be taken to imply that the teacher, or whatever authority figure you ran afoul of, just straight up beat the shit out of Mikey. Which really doesn't seem unfair given his tendency to stove their noses in with his cranium. But again, this is a more non-violent Mikey, a more socially responsible Mikey. So now when he gets caught, he just hangs his head in shame. Meanwhile, in the locker room, you can see that the jars have all been replaced with small piles of 3 hearts, and you just yell at them 3 times to collect them. Can't have the youth running out and beating their heads against glassware, it's just not safe. You've probably noticed that, unlike the teacher, I've been using the yell quite freely to stun the janitor and the chef. So it's okay to yell at the staff, but not the faculty? I'm getting mixed messages from you here, High School Graffiti. Is this a blue-collar versus white-collar thing? Also, I can't help but find it a little odd that Mikey High School Graffiti sees absolutely no problem with Mikey aggressively thrusting his buttocks at his fellow adolescents. But hey, I'm no sociologist. Back in hallway number 2, it's pretty much business as usual. Nothing too out of the ordinary here compared to Mikey Classic. In our next room, instead of the heart in a jar on the central table, we have the now standard pile of 3 hearts that we have to yell at 3 times. And there's also another, more subtle change here. Have you noticed it? Yep, in the upper right, instead of restaurant, this is now called the canteen, which strikes me as an even stranger choice of word. Are we in military school now? Well, never mind. We've got all our hearts. We're on our way. Bottom half of hallway 1, same as it ever was. And it's going to lead us, just as before, into the dance studio. But you can see in the upper right once again that this is now called the gym, which seems to me a sensible change. After all, most high schools I think don't have a dedicated dance studio. That sort of thing will just usually happen in the standard gymnasium. One other change here is that the gym teacher, being a teacher, is invulnerable to Mikey's yell. In the world of high school graffiti, educators have 100% resistance to sonic attack, just like real life. That does make this stage a bit more dangerous than it was in Mikey Classic, because it can be kinda risky to grab the uppermost hearts and slip out the door without being able to stun the gym teacher. But we made it okay. And that leaves us only the schoolyard, previously known as the garden. That also seems like a sensible change to me, because not all high schools are going to have a garden, but I'm sure they've all got a schoolyard. Tough though they may be, we see that football players are not immune to Mikey's mighty vocal cords. And at last, we can sneak up and get our little kiss from Mandy, and oh, it's happened again. But wait a minute, something there was missing. Alright, my eagle-eyed viewers, what was wrong with that picture? That's right, no car. And that's just kind of bewildering to me. I mean, it's totally possible to be a legally licensed driver while of high school age. There were lots of kids at my high school that had cars. So, I don't know. Maybe it was just an objection to Mikey's extreme form of ghost riding the whip. Having his car roll all the way to school with no one in it. Man, no car, no built-in form of self-defense against the faculty. Mikey in high school graffiti's got it rough. And wait a minute, I just noticed something. Of the 2 frames of animation that make up Mikey's new death animation of chagrin, one of them is the O-face. And given that that now comes as a result of coming in contact with school faculty, staff, and football players, this just got a whole lot creepier. Yeah, let's try not to think about that too much. Anyway, at this point we've seen almost all of the changes that happened between Mikey Original Recipe and High School Graffiti. There's just one more that we'll have to check out when we get back to the classroom. So we'll just have to pick up those last 2 piles of hearts over there. I'm still not entirely sure why we have to yell at them, but what the hell. It's not like the rest of this game is any great bastion of logic. E.g., the power of basketball compels you. Alright, over we go to homeroom. And so far everything's just as we're used to. The look of hate. So, what could be this last big change, I hear you ask? Well, to that I can only say, wait for it. Any moment now. There it is! The teacher can throw his fucking teeth at you! What's more, he seems to be able to do that pretty much any time he wants, including when you're rightfully in your seat like a good little boy. Needless to say, this can make the classroom in Step 2 onward of High School Graffiti a little on the unpredictable side. You certainly have to be a good deal more alert, because even sitting in your seat isn't safe anymore. I actually kinda like this touch, even though it can introduce a bit of RNG into the game that wasn't really there before. Well, let's just see if we can finish up the classroom, and then we'll be about ready to finish up with Mikey High School Graffiti. Holy shit, a behind-the-back denture toss while writing on the blackboard. Now that's talent. And I think on that note, we're about ready to move on to our 3rd and final variation of Mikey. Our last revision of Mikey is... well, technically it doesn't involve Mikey at all. In Shin Toru-Kun, or New Hire Tooru, we leave high school behind for the corporate world, and assume the persona of a young salaryman named Toru. While I haven't been able to unearth any hard evidence of this, I suspect that the game was originally developed as Mikey, then somewhat haphazardly retrofitted for this office-themed Japanese incarnation. The new graphics occasionally seem somewhat ill-fitting, and in places the veneer is thin enough that you can still see signs of Mikey's high school right through it. If that is accurate, that would make this a rather unusual case of a Japanese game company starting with an American theme, then reverse localizing it. But once again, we'll take a little stroll through the building and see what you think. Right away, we can see that our new protagonist is a redhead in a business suit, but the hip zap is still in play. And the headbutt has made its triumphant return. Indeed, Shin Toru-Kun is mechanically identical to Mikey Classic. It's pretty much just an official sprite hack. And in our preview here, you can see that we have traded the classroom for the office room. And our lives, instead of American flags, are business suit icons. Fair enough. Alright, let's stick it to the man. They didn't do too bad a job on the graphical overhaul for the office room. We've got office accessories on all the desks. The blackboard has been replaced with a whiteboard. And I like the way they gave the teacher a little potbelly to make him look a little more like a boss. On the other hand, the way the football players have been replaced with just kinda lumpy guys in blue, that's one of the graphical changes that, as mentioned in the intro, seems to me a little ill-fitting. Out in the hallway, we still see the American flag lunchboxes for some reason. Again, sometimes the veneer between Mikey's high school and the new office is very, very thin. The locker room, too, seems a little more like something that belongs in a school than in a corporate office building. I mean, sure, it's not entirely unusual for an office to have a locker room for the employees, but would there really be basketballs lying around everywhere? Well, maybe in some workplaces there are, but not in any I've ever been a part of. Do bear with me a moment. In all three versions of the game, the locker room can be kind of a pain because it takes the longest to gather the hearts here, what with having to headbutt or yell at all of the heart receptacles 3 times. And then anytime you die, in any room really, you will have to redo the whole thing because you don't get to keep any of your previously acquired hearts. We've already got our first one up though, which is nice. Hopefully 3rd time's a charm. Ah! Alright, this time for sure. Alright, just gotta get out of here now. Much better. No changes to Hallway 2, aside from the new boss replacing the teacher. And this is once again the restaurant rather than the canteen. No changes here, and indeed you will find that the level with the most changes by far is the office room replacing the classroom. On the other hand, restaurant at least seems to make a little more sense for an office building than it did for a high school. I mean, lots and lots of office complexes will have a restaurant in the lobby or some such. Alright, let's see if we can get out of here before we get pegged by any flying meat. Done and done. And down we go to what is still called the dance studio, and I would say this is the most glaring example of the conversion from Mikey to Toru-Kun sometimes being a little half-assed, because this is clearly no longer a dance studio. It seems to be some kind of OL office, OL being short for office ladies, a particularly Japanese class of low-level employees that mostly make copies and fetch coffee and stuff like that. Anyway, that is going to bring us to the final stage of Step 1, Still the garden, but holy shit, it's the fuzz. I gotta say, Toru-Kun is pretty hardcore. If you ran around Japan headbutting cops, I think your life would pretty much be over. No idea what the girlfriend's name is in this, but she looks completely identical to Mandy minus the pom-poms. Still ghost riding the whip? Still having an accident? And from here on out, it continues to be the same old Mikey with a very thin layer of business on top. The one other thing about Shin Toru-Kun that I can think of that bears mentioning is that it was the only version of the game to get a console port. It was released for the SG-1000, a Japan-only Sega console that was the predecessor of the Master System, and there was also an MSX adaptation. And with that, I think we've pretty much covered the bases. Much like Double Dragon, Mikey was a game I always enjoyed spending time with back in the day, and one that I think holds up pretty well. It's simple, but with just enough level-to-level variety to keep things interesting, and a solid challenge that always makes me want to see just how long I can stretch my quarter. And while I can understand the kind of concerns that led to high school graffiti, it's Mikey original recipe that's always gonna be my jam. It was the one I played first, and after that, graffiti feels like the corners are filed down just a bit too much. As far as I'm concerned though, you really can't go wrong with either. It's a weird little diamond in the rough that never quite got the love it deserved, and I thank you very much for taking the time to share it with me. Until next time, I am Un, and that's game, Hendrix. I Played a Thing was brought to you today by Justin Carpenter, Nolden, Zangamarth, Charlie Dunst, Anonymous Benefactor, John Madigan, Sanguine Games, Misha Van Doren, Frank Grizzy, Tim J., Lolo De Puzzlo, Joshua C. Ritchie, Darren Chow, Sonic Rose, EX Potemkin, Alicia Goranson, Argyle Jelly, Mechasaurus, DG Jono, Doug Russell, August Fortnight, Patrick Bellinger, and the rest of my wonderful patrons. We've got one more very generous soul jumping up to the top tier, so as usual I'll be updating that at the turn of the month. As always, thanks also go out to everyone watching, commenting, and subscribing. You all really help keep this interesting, and I really appreciate it. Take care, have a good Sunday, and I'll see you real soon.